let me ask you something. What if every single time you took a sip of water, you were also swallowing thousands of tiny, invisible plastic particles? It's a pretty unsettling thought, right? Well, today we're going to dive in and find out what's really going on with our water. You know, we all kind of assume the water we drink is pure, that it's clean. But what if it's not? The latest science is making us ask a pretty uncomfortable question. What's actually hiding in there? All right, take a look at this number, 240,000. Just on its own, it seems massive, almost unbelievable. But what in the world does it stand for? That is the estimated number of plastic particles found in a single liter of bottled water. This comes from some really recent research out of Columbia University. And here's the crazy part. About 90% of those were nanoplastics. We're talking about particles so incredibly small, you could line up thousands of them across the width of a single human hair. They are literally invisible to the naked eye. So let's break this down. What exactly are these invisible contaminants we're talking about? Okay, so you'll hear two terms thrown around a lot. The World Health Organization, or WHO, defines microplastics as any plastic bit smaller than 5 millimeters. But then there are nanoplastics. They're a whole different level of small, less than 1 micrometer. Remember, a human hair is about 70 micrometers thick. So yeah, we are talking about stuff that is truly microscopic. And look, this isn't just a bottled water problem, not by a long shot. As the WHO clearly states, these particles are everywhere. They're ubiquitous. They're in the oceans, in the air we breathe, in our food, and yep, in both our bottled water and the water that comes straight from the tap. It's kind of unavoidable in our modern world. So, of course, this leads to the big question that pretty much everyone asks. Which one's safer? Is it the tap water or is it bottled? Well, the answer really comes down to how they're regulated. Here in the United States, you've got two different government agencies running the show. Your public tap water, that's looked after by the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. But bottled water, that's considered a packaged food. So it falls under the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA. And that one little difference is super important because it means different rules and different standards. And here's a perfect example of why those different regulations matter. Let's talk about lead. For tap water, the EPA has what's called an action level of 15 parts per billion. That's the point where the utility company has to step in and do something. But the FDA, for bottled water, their limit is much stricter, just 5 parts per billion. And you can bet the bottled water industry points to examples like this as proof that their standards are higher. All right, so what does the bottled water industry have to say for itself? Well, the International Bottled Water Association, or IBWA, basically argues that their products are not only safe, but also very high quality. They talk a lot about what they call a multi-barrier approach to keep things safe. It sounds technical, but it really just means they have multiple layers of protection. It all starts with protecting the water's source and keeping a close eye on it. Then, during the bottling process, they use things like superfine microfiltration and zap it with ozonation or UV light to make sure it's purified before it ever gets sealed in a bottle. The industry also makes a really interesting point. They say they're not trying to wage a war on tap water. Their real competition, they say, sugary drinks. They position bottled water as the healthy, smart choice for people trying to ditch sodas and other sweet drinks. And they make an environmental case, too. They argue that when you look at all the different packaged beverages out there, producing bottled water actually uses less water and less energy than making things like soda. So in their view, it has the smallest environmental footprint of the bunch. Okay, so regulations and industry claims are one thing, but what about the million-dollar question? What does all this mean for our health? What does the actual science say about the risks of drinking these plastic particles? For that, let's turn to the World Health Organization. The WHO really breaks the potential risks down into 3 main categories. First, is there a physical hazard from the particles themselves? Second, is there a chemical hazard from the additives inside the plastic? And third, what about the risk of nasty microbes growing on the surface of these plastics? So first, the physical risk. Could these tiny particles actually get absorbed by our bodies and cause damage? Well, according to the WHO, based on everything we know right now, there's no reliable info to suggest this is a concern. But, and this is a big but, they're quick to say we need a lot more research, especially on those super tiny nanoplastics. All right, next up is the chemical risk. Plastics have all sorts of additives in them. Plus, they can act like little sponges, soaking up pollutants from the water around them. The worry is that those chemicals could then get into our bodies. Here again, the WHO says that at the levels we're currently being exposed to, it's a low concern for our health. And finally, we've got the biofilm risk. This is the idea that harmful bacteria could set up shop and start growing on the surface of these plastic particles. And you know the pattern by now. The WHO also considers this a low health concern, mostly because our water already has tons of other natural particles that can do the exact same thing, and our treatment systems are built to handle that.
So, if the direct health risk from microplastics seems to be low, at least for now, what should we be focused on? This is where the WHO really encourages us to take a step back and put everything into perspective.
They want us to ask ourselves a simple but powerful question. With all this focus and worry on microplastics, are we maybe overlooking a much, much bigger threat that we already know is in our drinking water? Here's another number for you, 485,000. And this one has nothing to do with plastic. This is about a danger we've known about for a very, very long time.
That is how many people the WHO estimates die every single year from diseases they get from microbially contaminated drinking water. Let me put that plainly. While we're worried about the potential harm from plastics, there is a proven deadly threat from pathogens in our water that is a far, far greater danger to us right now.
So, the WHO's advice is really clear. First, let's focus on the known killers, the microbes and the chemical contaminants. Second, if we improve our water treatment to get rid of those, it'll get rid of the microplastics too. Third, and this is the big one, we have to cut down on plastic pollution at the source. And finally, for right now, they don't think routine monitoring for microplastics in our drinking water is necessary.
So in the end, maybe the question we've been asking, tap or bottled, isn't the right one. A much better question, a much bigger question might be, how do we protect all our water from plastic pollution? Because the plastic we throw away today becomes a part of the water we drink tomorrow. The real challenge is figuring out how to protect this precious resource for all of us, for generations to come.